Welcome to the Old Republic Podcast.
We are a podcast that discusses Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, general sci-fi, and about the stories that inspired a galaxy.
Consider this a spoiler warning for everything under the sun and the twin suns in that galaxy far, far away.
This is where the fun begins. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Old Republic Podcast. Today we are joined by none other than Joseph David Spence, who was kind enough to lend us his vast talents in the audio drama. So today we're going to be specifically talking about KOTOR story part 2, Bastila Identity, and Joseph David Spence was in charge of doing the music, the composing this time around. You might remember we talked to him kind of in the behind the scenes for part 1, doing the voice of Malik there, and another one, name is totally escaping me right now.
Saul.
Hi
everybody,
Saul
it's me.
and
I was two
right
people,
there.
and now I'm doing another thing.
He was two people, and now he is doing the composing. That's a third person, and then, spoiler, he's going to be back to do some more Malik stuff in part 3, in the music there too. But today, specifically, we're talking about Bastila Identity, part 2, because it's going to be coming out, or it already is out. You know, we're kind of in the world between worlds here on the Old Republic podcast, so depending on when you're listening to this, you may have already heard the music, or you might be getting it teased to you right now. Going to play a little bit of it, and then let Joseph introduce himself. So, Joseph, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. How are you doing today? And tell everyone a little bit about your background as far as doing music work like this is concerned.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Old Republic podcast. Let's see, for music, that's a longer story, and I know I tend to get pretty long-winded when it comes to stories in general. So before I was doing voice acting, I was doing this music thing. Composing is like that's the thing I went to school for, and music and everything in general. It's all Star Wars' fault still.
As for most things.
For most things. I mean, there's a whole generation of folks who, and this includes me, and it also includes my dad, who was who did a lot of work in film composition, and that's the reason why I got into it, really. But yeah, I think I told this story last time I was on here, seeing episode 1 for the first time, 5 years old, and doing the title crawl and all that stuff. But yeah, man, I still hold to this day that the best out of all of the Star Wars scores, including the original trilogy, I think you have everything that you need and more in the episode 1 score. Everybody goes ham about Duel of the Fates, and it's really great. But man, if you haven't had the chance, there's a specific album of the episode 1 score where it's got Darth Maul's face on it, and he's kind of going blah on it, but it's blue. It's 2 discs, but it's every single cue in episode 1 from the 20th Century Fox theme all the way through the end credits, and then they do this little cute thing of Duel of the Fates with like the actors speaking over it. It feels very cinematic, but it's so
that
good.
That is cool.
Yeah. It's such a cool thing. Anyways, how did I get started writing music? Yeah, I think it was just a thing of a couple of specific memories, one of which was Star Wars. And then I do remember my dad was working on he was doing the music for a PS1 or PS2 video game that ended up going nowhere. But I remember just watching and listening to the music he was making, and then watching like the video game stuff happen on the screen. And I'm like, this is the coolest. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah. This
is the coolest fucking thing that I've ever seen. I didn't know what that word was back then, but yeah. And I listened to that. That was my I listened to that suite of music that he wrote for like 3 years nonstop, of just like, this is the coolest freaking thing. And then I got shown the ropes of there was another program back in the day. There used to be magazines about computers and computer programs. specifically for like Macintosh. Before Apple was a thing, it was Macintosh computers, and there was a magazine called Mac Addict that my dad would get. And what was so cool about it is in every issue of the magazine there was also a CD, with like a bunch of demos for different programs and games, and that's how most of the video games that I played as a child came from those, including Unreal Tournament, Rune, Star Trek Elite Force, StarCraft, etc. All through the Mac Addict CDs. But there was another program that I got my hands onto, which was called Groove Machine, and it was very rudimentary. You got a bunch of loops, and it was basically a DJ program for like early 2000s, kind of techno, house music kind of stuff. But I got my hands on that, was messing around with it, and then did that enough where my dad saw me doing it. It was like, it's time. It wasn't in this voice, but it felt like it's time. We got you in the big leagues, and then I started working with Logic, which is the same DAW, digital audio workstation that I work with today, and started writing my own sort of music there. There's a couple of I know I have some like early stuff that is, I think, lost to the sands of time and hard drives, etc. But like the first thing that I wrote for sure and like shared and is still somewhere on my SoundCloud, I'm sure, but it's I did when I was 12. And it was very fun, very cool, and started writing music for film, like professionally, getting paid to do so when I got out of high school.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just nothing huge, but I wrote a cue of music that got into like some Hallmark movie shot in all Canadian folks, and there was a dog.
That's the big leagues.
Yeah, I don't think it actually made it onto Hallmark. It was probably, I think it was like, a straight to DVD home video thing. It was about, a dog trying to save Christmas, the usual thing. But yeah, the cue that I got was this very like emotional thing with the main girl. Her mom died, and she's going through all the stuff with her dead mom and all this stuff, and I got to write that, and that was very fun. And apparently the director had no notes for that cue, and the little theme that I wrote for the dead mom got used throughout the rest of the movie, which was very fun.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I went to school, got my first piece of paper in not writing music but playing it. I'm also in addition to doing all of these other things, one of the hats that I wear is I'm a saxophonist. I play classical saxophone. I'm currently in a saxophone quartet that plays in and around LA. We're having a good time. But I got my first degree in that, but was also still writing music, and kind of switched into the concert music scene. It's a lot more fun getting real people to play your stuff instead of trying to make the sounds in your box work and sound real. And then went to grad school, kept doing that, and then suddenly, after the pandemic, I've with all of this resurging in podcasts, I've been writing a lot more music for podcasts and audio dramas lately, which is very, very fun. And I think I said this last time. It's a very different skill set because you don't have the visual sort of medium to lean on. I think you got to do a little more work. Or not you. I don't think the music has to do a little more work. It's that the medium relies on the music more than it would in a movie or something with visuals. I think that's the end of my rant.
Yeah, so that's a pretty cool origin story, and like I didn't know most of that, so that was cool to hear, and I'm sure our listeners think it's cool. So yeah, Star Wars, like, I mean, we have a Star Wars podcast, but like it's kind of amazing like how many people it inspired, like whether they're like in, showbiz, or just like, just regular people, like it inspired them to be more creative. But I think like that's probably the number one most influencing like series out there, so yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Especially music wise. I mean, John Williams
Yeah.
changed the game in a lot of ways.
John Williams, like, I don't know how, I don't know, like, what the music space will look like without him. Maybe Hans Zimmer will kind of be the new John Williams, but, yeah, like, there's so much cool, musical cues that he did, and also just in films like Ennio Morricone, Hans Zimmer. There's lots of talented people out there. So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I really, before, listen, if we want to talk about film composers, we'd be here for 3 hours, and it would just be 3 hours of me just talking at you guys. But
yeah,
I just to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying, I'm really encouraged by some of the new composers that are popping up, like all of the work that Ludwig Göransson has done,
yeah,
with Black Panther, but also The Mandalorian, Tenet, and oh God, what was the most recent thing he did? Oh, Oppenheimer.
yeah. I
All of
loved
that.
the score in Oppenheimer. I'll have
Yeah.
to see Tenet again, or maybe I'll just listen to the score of Tenet so I can actually hear it. You know,
Yeah, it's
'cause-
really
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It's really wild, and all the stuff that he does, that he plays with time, but all of that still ties into the story. He's really good at doing the job of every film composer, which is telling the story through the music, somehow, and having the music be a character in it. But yeah, there's a bunch of folks cropping up, and they're all really talented. And I, honestly, the thing that the thing that probably keeps the film score, the film composer landscape from doing that John Williams thing is that what John Williams does is really intricate. I mean, man's doing old school stuff, and if you want, we can go into the weeds on what exactly. I'm not sure how valuable that would be for your listeners, but like it's really like what you hear is for the most part what he writes on pencil, on paper, sitting down at his piano. And I personally, I don't have to do that, and I also just don't have the training. I could. It would be a lot longer of a process, and just But yeah, so what John Williams does is so complex, and that's part of the reason why it's so good, and he knows exactly what to do and all that stuff after a lifetime of doing this.
Yeah.
The other thing is, though, is that like to a lot of producers and directors and sort of studio folks, that is a quote unquote old fashioned sound, and most of them, like there's a part of the craft that is very difficult, and then there's just a part of the ethos and the understanding of what that sound is that is just alien now to most folks. Like if you take a listen to the difference in quality, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. There's a very distinct difference in the sequel trilogy between the music that John Williams got asked to write between episodes 7 and 9 and what Rian Johnson had him write in episode 8. And out of those three, not my favorite movies by any stretch, and The Last Jedi being very controversial, etc. But out of those three, man, The Last Jedi score works so much more than the kind of other the stuff happens cues that go on in episode 7 and 9.
Yeah, it might be controversial, but I kind of agree. But because I think like for 7 and 9, they're just like, people want the old stuff, just kind of like make it sound like the old stuff. But I kind of think like in the development of episode 8, I mean, like in The Force Awakens, at least we had Rey's theme. I think that's a good song.
Oh yeah, and it's great. It's so good, and John Williams is like, oh yeah, this was super great. I love doing this.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like he was kind of given room to create in The Last Jedi. So, yeah. So probably at that point that we said that, like, our listeners tuned out, but I guess we could kind of. So that kind of talks about like kind of like how your origin story, I guess, like and your inspiration, and like, and then part one, of course, was of our audio drama Bastila Strike was composed by Dennis. But
Dennis, whose name
know,
I butchered last time I was on here,
yeah,
and who I have since apologized to. But yeah, Dennis is great.
Yeah.
His music was amazing.
Yeah, and he just had like, like work stuff, real life stuff, and scheduling conflicts. So I was like, does anyone know like a composer? Like, and a lot of people referred me to you, and I said, would that be something you'd be interested in? And here you are scoring parts 2 and 3 of our audio drama. I say triptych, but maybe trilogy is a word that trends better.
I like triptych though because the story ain't done with 3,
Yeah.
but it is this little snapshot into a character specific thing. To me, the triptych makes more sense. Don't ask me to spell that word, but it's a better word, I think.
It's just a word. If you go to a museum, people like the museum staff will just appreciate you more, I think.
Yeah. Plus, we gotta figure out a way to, open up and swing open the doors like most triptychs have. You swing it on the hinges and you see all 3. You gotta figure out a way to do that for the audio drama.
Yeah. So Strike was kind of very much like a space battle and then lightsaber battle. And then part 2 is much more of a conversation. And I think like we kind of listened to it, and it starts, on Dantooine. And I was like, ooh, I love Dantooine. And I was like, can we kind of make this sound like, like in Dune, like when, what's their name? The Bene Gesserit. Yeah. They come up like some chanting, and I'm like, can we get like some like Star Warsy, like Gregorian chants? Because like I kind of just wanted to emphasize the Jedi Council is powerful, but they maybe interfere more than they should, and maybe they're too rigid in their thinking, and I just thought it would sound different and cool. What did you kind of think about the beginning of part 2?
Yeah. Well, do we want to play any of that for your audience, and then we can kind of talk about it after?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first cue from that. And yeah, I remember Cassie, Cassia, your specific asks were Benny Gesserit specific. I wrote down on my sheet Benny Gesserit whispers, and I was like, ooh, I love that. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try. And that's most film composers for anything. I was like, I love that so much. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try. And yeah, this sort of foreboding vibe throughout the beginning. I feel like so much of this second episode, like there was one sort of image musical motif, is this idea of just like it's raining the whole time. It is dark, and not necessarily dark and stormy, but dark and raining. And there is this sense of a Pyrrhic victory of we did the thing, but it's not what the Jedi wanted, and sort of seeing the moral, the lack of moral righteousness in sort of the good guys, and having Bastila specifically reckon with that was very fun to sort of go into. I pulled a lot out of the John Williams prequel Standing, Walking, and Talking musical bag, but it's such a good bag to pull from. So you probably heard a couple of things, lots of voices in the beginning, not only the whispery female kind of chanty bits, but also like and I think in the original game score, a lot of Bastila's musical themes were female choir, and I could be wrong. I haven't listened to that score in a while, but using that this sort of female choir juxtaposed with that sort of Gregorian chant kind of vibe was I felt also fit the vibe that you specifically requested as well, which was I wanted to feel ancient, and for Hans Zimmer in Dune, he went to the complete other side of the world, and I kind of stayed within the European sort of ancient musical landscape that we're a little more familiar with that. In terms of themes in this first opening cue, the big one is Bastila's theme, which shows up throughout the whole dang score, but it shows up in the French horns in the very opening before we get any narration, and then kind of continues throughout in that the female vocals. That's usually where I try to put it. But then we also get a little sneak peek of the what's his name in this? Vinar's theme. Well, it is actually no. You're right. This is Revan's theme specifically, and that shows up in some trombones later. Doing my leitmotif best. But a
lot of people. It's kind of like they play Scrabble with Revan's name, and it's like, I thought all of the options had been taken, but I was like, oh, Vinar, we'll call him Vinar. So,
no, Vinar's great, and there is a Vinar theme, but that shows up later in the episode.
Yeah, and then I think like something people don't realize is like John Williams, and sometimes just in movies, like they're silent sometimes, like there's no score just so you can hammer home things, because like when we're looking at the Jedi Council talking, it's kind of just mostly a conversation with no musical score, and that was kind of a choice I think we kind of made when we were discussing and listening to it for the first time.
Yeah, if I remember right, part of the reason why is sometimes music can get in the way of the story, and the typical rule of thumb is if there's a bunch of dialogue going on, you don't want a lot of music hammering around with that, which of course is really a funny thing to say when it's an audio drama, and that's all anybody else is doing is talking the whole time, which is
Yeah.
they're fun to score. But so there's that logistical part of it, but then there's also just the idea of, I think the conversation is much more theatrical and tenser. Without, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, I definitely agree. So maybe like I should just produce this as like a play or something, and more people can see it, and maybe just change some of the names so they can't be like, this is a KOTOR fanfic, right? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's about religion, you know? And
Yeah. For you, I wish you and your special effects budget all of the best of luck for that play.
I guess only part 2 and maybe parts of 3 could be a play, but yeah. Maybe it could be a closet play, which is like, you know, back in the day, like things that were written as plays but could never be produced due to like budgetary restraints. But yeah, anyways, so Star Wars audio drama. I like literature, I'm sorry, but when the council kind of decides like we're gonna you know, give Revan a new identity, wipe away his memories and everything, and have him, you know, work for us, I was kind of like, I kind of want it to be like a powerful like force theme, like kind of more primal, like something powerful is happening. Like maybe it's like, you know, when you're in the ocean and you get hit by a really big wave, you know, like, is it good or bad, or did it just happen to you? And
Well, we do have the cue before that scene too, where with Bastila.
Oh
yeah.
Okay. How about you tell me about that, because you're, you know, the musical artiste. So
Well, okay, I'm just writing music to what you guys all did. Yeah, so this is the points in that whole council conversation where they're trying to figure out what all to do with Bastila now that she kind of did the mission but really didn't do the mission because Revan's still alive. Oh God, what do we do with him now?
yeah.
And this is the scene where I think it starts with Vrook, played by the wonderful Marcus Mosley,
Yeah.
telling Bastila to kneel, and there's this whole thing that happens that's a bit of a turn. I forgot what our rules are on spoilers.
You can spoil away.
Yeah, so Vrook says Neil, Bastila, you're so powerful, you're so talented as a Jedi, you're so wonderful. He grabs her braid and she thinks, oh my God, this is my moment, I'm getting a promotion. And he's like, psych, nope. You didn't do what we wanted to do. Also, you look like shit. Why don't you go get some sleep? Because you looked, I think one of the lines is you look tired.
Yeah.
So there's that whole thing, which is very fun. But yeah, so musically, I was like, okay, well, this is our moment to do a binary sunset that's not on Tatooine, because of copyright infringement reasons. But so it's very much like the I'm trying to do a Force theme without doing the Force theme thing, and it's and then it turns, and kind of talking about what you were saying about like music not being over dialogue. There is a trick in trick of the trade where instead of like in a fight scene, if somebody hits somebody, you might do something musically to be like bang, wham, bow with instruments. There's also the opposite effect where the music all fades away so that what is happening on screen or with our characters can be emphasized more, and so the music cuts away I think right when he says however, and comes back and completely turns on its head when he says you I think the line is, you have proven yourself to be defiant, and on defiant it's dun dun dun. I think it's literally dun dun dun. And kind of turns from there, as we get some more I guess, yeah, the best word for that is sinister. Sinister Jedi Council music. As they're treating our girl Bastila, they're doing her a dirty.
Yeah.
And she goes and cries about it.
Yeah, I guess she might be too exhausted to cry, but yeah, it's not a good moment. Like, just kind of falls asleep crying, I guess. But
Crying is not the Jedi way.
We told you the Jedi way. Sorry, that's spoilers.
Yeah. We don't care about spoilers, so if anything, it gets people hooked. It gets people interested, you know.
Well, it's also, I have listened to this thing back again. Between you and me, Brian, we know this thing backwards and forwards.
That's right. Part 3, I know backwards and forwards. Part 2 was a little bit easier because it was just laying down some atmosphere and then letting you come in and do your musical trick, right? I just had to get the soundscape of some, I don't know, some rock walls and some candle lights. That was all I needed for part 2.
And rain.
So.
Don't forget about the rain.
There's some rain.
Yeah.
Now that's a spoiler.
The rain's a character in this one, so
it is for sure.
Yeah. I kind of just wanted the council to kind of just seem like an extreme where Malik is kind of an extreme. They kind of like put limits on the Force. It's like they don't just say like use the Force, like Qui-Gon would say probably. They say, like, be one with us and the Force. They're putting limits on the Force. Like, you have to adhere to their point of view before you can, find the Force. So
yeah, it's very much that organized religion thing of, yes, there is this omnipotent, ever-present source of divinity all around us that we are the mouthpieces for, so you have to do what we say.
Yeah. It's kind of like, maybe Revan, he did fall to the dark side, but, like, Qui-Gon, of his time is probably more of a mystic than, like, part of the orthodoxy of the Jedi Council, I think that's like what Jedi probably should do, Force users should do, is just kind of like find their own path rather than like listen to like Atris, but maybe that's just me. So yeah.
Well, that also might just be Atris. I completely agree. The Jedi are at their best when they are keepers of the peace and guardians of justice in the weak, and that usually happens when they are out in the galaxy and not all bottled up on Coruscant, playing cops
in a high
to
tower.
Senators. Yeah.
Okay, so now.
And then we do the thing you were talking about earlier.
The thing I was talking about earlier, when we were kind of talking about this cue, it's kind of like a ritual that the Jedi Council are doing. It's like kind of like ancient. And at first I was like, what are the words they would say, for this? And then I was like, oh, I think it's just the Jedi code, And then I was kind of like, when I was giving direction to you, it was like, it's powerful, it's primal, it's kind of like a wave. Like, is it good or bad? Who knows? But you got hit by a wave, What kind of musical direction did you take this in?
Yeah, this is probably the most different in terms of vibe that I've done in a long time. And this was really fun to do. Mostly because the one of the main features of the cue, you'll hear it in just a second. So one of the main features of this cue is this female choir that's different. It's a lot more strident than the sort of classical Gregorian in church thing. This is actually it's a sample library based off of the female singers. I forget what the name of this group escapes me, but they're like the Bulgarian women's folk choir.
Wow,
thing.
So cool.
And it's like, and you if you hear it, you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. And it's like the coolest thing for me as a composer. I just have to hit a note, and if I just keep hitting that note, it sounds like I know exactly what I'm doing, and it's just like it's so ready to go. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what this is going to be. This is going to be this sounds ancient, very chanty, but not sinister, because we can't. One of the things that was difficult was trying to convey this sense of like, this isn't the best thing that we're doing here, and showing sort of that lack of moral righteousness with the Jedi Council and their actions, without going straight into that, the Sith kind of dark side music, which is all very low, male heavy choir stuff as well. That that sort of Darth Plagueis cue of just that sound.
Yeah,
couldn't do that. Because that is, Star Wars fans, we go, oh, dark side, but this is not dark side, it's something else. So that was fun to figure out how to do that. And then lots of big stankin' drums, and there's some didgeridoo stuff in there. But yeah, I think the tool bag that I pulled from for this one was not any kind of John Williams at all. Maybe a little bit of, in terms of Star Wars stuff, maybe a little bit of that Ludwig Göransson Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett kind of vibe. But really, if I'm being honest, they're one of my favorite groups in the last few years that I've discovered, and I've since seen them live. I have a band shirt. Is this Scandinavian quote unquote metal group called Heilung? They don't do concerts, they do rituals. They go on stage, they have the main gal. It's three people, two guys and their singer gal named Maria Franz. And she's got these deer antlers coming out of this headdress. There's cloth covering her eyes, white makeup, and it's just like, wow, what world am I in right now? What year am I in? And it's this, but the show is amazing, but the music is also just like so. It's nothing like you've ever heard. But the adjective to describe that is primal, and I was like, let's see if we can do that. And it was very fun to go to that place, do some fun chanting. And then also have get the orchestra in there as well.
Yeah, and it sounded really cool, and I am so curious about like that group you said. It's Hylam, Scandinavian band. So I'm gonna they don't pay me for this, but I will plug them because they're great. You can find them on Instagram as Amplified History, and then you spell the name of the group HEILUNG. They got a few albums out, but it's nothing like nothing you've ever heard before. Certainly. Yeah, sounds like the movie The Northman.
Very much like that. And in fact, if they did I think they're doing the music for the upcoming Hellblade game as well.
Oh wow.
Oh, cool.
They're doing well for themselves. So
they're working, certainly.
Yeah. So, I guess we can listen to A Dantooine Military Landing Pad, Dawn, A New Day.
So I do. Can I talk a little bit about the first iteration of this cue?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. So this one was the hardest, and not including the end credits because I went back and did that later. This one was the hardest for me to do because I knew this was the one where I was like, okay, we got to go full into this John Williams bag and just do all of the things in there. Because there were so many in the story here. There were so many little moments of emotional shift and character perspective that it was not only just mapping them out, but then kind of making a cohesive throughput throughout all of them. Lots of things for this one. So yeah, this is me doing the most John Williams of the John Williams of it all, and it was a blast to do so. And thank you. This was so much fun to be like, oh, I am now a better composer because I tried doing this. But was it interior or exterior Dantooine military landing pad?
Exterior, because
I figured it would be an exterior.
Outside.
But so there's that ding that happens, and the original cue, beginning of this cue was very much, I was like, oh, it's Dantooine, it's the sun's rising, baby, we're ready to go. And I did this kind of Coruscant theme thing with just big brass dong gong gong gong, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. And I finished the cue and I sent it off to Cassie, and she's like, yeah, this is all great except that. That's the nature of the gig. You're completely right to do so. But I was like, oh man,
I'm here to crush
go
dreams,
fix it.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But it was thankfully you knew what you wanted, which is that's the most frustrating. It was just like, I just don't like it. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. But that's not what you did. You said, I want it to be this. I want it to be the sun rising, over the meadow. There's still dew on the grass. It's very calm. And I'm like, okay, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's code for, okay, clarinet solo.
Yeah. Coruscant, crossed out, clarinet solo.
Clarinet solo, dawn over the grass, fine. But yeah, this is the cue. Part of the reason why this was very fun was I really love this musical theme for Vanar, which is very different and distinct from Revan's theme, which is also kind of present throughout this whole thing. Revan's theme being that, so bum 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 da da dum. That's Revan's theme, but Vanar's theme it's similar to that, but I wanted to write this idea of nobility, where he's ultimately a good dude, but there's just not something settled about him. And it's always shifting. And I'll go into a little bit of the weeds here in terms of music writing. So the way that I did that was I kept for most of those opening chords for the main nugget of that theme, we don't resolve to the tonic ever. We start with the sort of the harmony is always in this kind of first inversion, this first inversion chord that resolves upwards, but we never really resolve to the one or sort of our home base. I'm realizing how insane I sound. But
so it could go major or minor, you mean?
Well, it's there's this thing where if you put a major chord, but instead of having the first note of the chord be in the bottom and the bass, if you put the third of the chord in the bass instead, it kind of gives this feeling of just like there's something not quite right. It's a very unstable chord. It wants to go to a lot of places naturally, and I used a ton of that throughout Vanar's theme. There's even sort of and then there's a bunch of hidden key changes that happen as we're just shifting around. There's stuff that goes from major to minor. Yeah, his theme is still I feel still retains the sense of nobility, but is just moving all over the place where you're not quite sure who this guy is, and he's not sure who he is either. And that was really fun to not only write, but to write, but also then to kind of do the thing and put it in there. So lots of that, and that's probably the most prevalent theme throughout this whole cue.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it was kind of fun to I think when I was writing it, I was like, ooh, it'd be so cool if Bastila is observing Vanar, but Vanar doesn't know that she's observing him, and then she's visited by Trask. because I was like,
that was
like, yeah. Go ahead.
that was fun to give Trask I gave Trask a little bit of a theme, or at least a moment where it was just big drums, big snare drum military march moment. I was like, this fits very well.
Yeah.
And the whole the sort of the moment where Trask and there's the shift where Bastila asks Trask to take care of Ensign Vinar. I think is the first time that we really get her theme in Ascendance, where it's not it's still this sort of melancholy motif and moment, but this sort of the sun is shining on her instead of it just being rain. And then that shifting into kind of her this big sweeping moment of Vinar's theme as sort of a thing between a connection between the two of those characters, showing a brighter future. It's all going to a better place, and then it doesn't.
It just has to go to hell first, I guess, and then it sort of does. So yeah, because I was like, this is me enticing listeners to be excited for part 3, like kind of like when it comes to like Revan and Bastila, like I think like the Force kind of wanted to balance out the galaxy, so you have Bastila on the light, Revan on the dark side, and the Force like kind of connects them. And kind of like I think like Revan kind of got lost. Like I don't care about the Revan novel, like I'm like, Sith Emperor who, like I flick him away, like don't care. You know, I think it was just kind of like, you know, the war kind of turned him, you know, but I think the Force is like wanting like Revan to be more balanced, not necessarily like has to be on the light side. And I think like maybe the Force is like this Jedi who's gifted with battle meditation is just kind of being kept under the thumb of the Jedi Council, you know. Maybe if these two meet, they'll be bonded. And like kind of like my thesis of KOTOR is like these two people like kind of each help each other become better people, you know, at different times. And who knows how part 3 resolves, but like that's kind of how I overall see I
mean, we know how it resolves.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. It resolves with Max Rebo like finding a holochronicle or a holocron in the future and telling the story of KOTOR through music. Yeah. So yeah, and then I think I was like, for Exterior Space Day, it's not even like really a paragraph. I was like, 1 year later, the Endar Spire lists over Terrace as it is bombarded by Sith forces. And like, have you ever seen Timeless Season 2, the finale?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
No.
Yeah, and you're like, no. And I was like, kind of, what if we evoke this music? And it's like, not John Williams, because I think like you're like, yeah, it could be like a nice like Lost in Space John Williams theme. And it's like, and I'm like, what if we do a cover of a Cyndi Lauper pop thing and just make it epic? we kind of came to an understanding, but like now looking back on it, I was like, most of my musical cues, I'm like, I wasn't really suggesting John Williams stuff, so it was kind of funny.
Well, that's my bread and butter. Like, listen, if you want to just bring me on to rant about John Williams at a later point, I could.
Yeah.
I could. It'd be 2 hours long. It'd be great for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the ending of that is it's a little, I mean, it may be a little bit on the nose, but in terms of the feeling of, oh no, but it was fun to call back to, the score that started it all with a little piccolo solo while we're in this sort of spacey thing. And the danger rises and rises and rises, and then big string run that gets us into the end credits, which are always fun. But I did those last because I didn't know how many more themes there were going to be, or how much time there was to stick them all in there. And just so for those listening at home, I don't know if this is after or before, but so that first theme is Revan's theme, with sort of the ritual vibe under it, followed by Bastila, and then we end off with some big ol' Vanar vibes.
Yeah. The credits sound awesome, and I think it's funny because this is like my first time really like ordering credits, so I was like, okay, Brian, let's see how long these are. How many seconds do you think we need? So then I think I was like, yeah, this many seconds, so it was a learning experience for me too. And
well,
just
you guys were very kind with the placement of your credits, because you gave the music at least in the last version that I heard, you gave the music this big old headway start thing, and then when the credits sort of died down into Bastila's theme, you're like, okay, now we'll do the boilerplate. I was like, that's very nice of you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to let it swell up there as much as I could, and then it's kind of a fine line. You'd mentioned it with the, being the audio drama that it is, because we'll have the YouTube version, which will just have the credits, on screen. But then on the version we release on the podcast, we'll have, Cassie and I reading the credits. So I was trying to kind of balance that level of sound so we can, get the voices in or not have the voices in. So it kind of made sense both ways. So.
And just for the BTS of it all, what I got sent was the video version of the credits, and used that as sort of a template for how much time I had to sort of divvy up that space with pure music.
You get two different experiences, so you can like both of them, and listen to both of them, share them with your friends. And I think it's funny because I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk with Joseph about the music in part 3. It'll probably be a 30-minute conversation, and I think it was like an hour and 45 minutes. I don't regret it. So, yeah.
It always takes longer than you think. Have we talked about, just again, I'm all about the BTS, and if this is the film score or the music score episode, do you want to kind of talk about what our conversation was like? We don't have to go into specifics, but it might be interesting for the folks at home to kind of see what all we talked about and how the approach is for stuff.
It would be interesting for me because I was traveling, so I did not
true.
get to be part of that. I sent through a couple of notes because I'd finished the sound design, but I was like, oh, I'm not going to be in town, so you guys have at it. But yeah, I think that would be good, right? So let's put a pin in that, right? So episode 2. KOTOR Bastila Identity is out or is coming out, so go listen to that. We've got some music cues here, and then we'll just we'll sprinkle out some goodness for part 3, which will be coming out kind of towards the end of the year, first of next year probably.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, we kind of listened to the whole thing and we kind of paused it, and I mean, you say you weren't there on the call, but we're just like, man, the sound design and sound effects are so good, because I think I only, like, the only sound effects I was like, we needed to add are dying gonk noises, and one I will keep close to my chest, until the time comes. But
we'll keep that for the actual behind the scenes episode for part 3.
Yeah. I guess I just like revealing things. It's fun.
Yes, you had the script for the sound design for part 3, and the only note on the whole script was are dying gonk noises possible? And yeah, I think so.
You made them possible. You made them a reality. What was only a dream.
If you can dream it, you can do it. That's the motto around here.
Yeah. So, and I think I was like, yeah, there'll probably only be a few themes in here, but did we kind of count at the end? And it's like, oh, this is 7 themes. No big deal.
Yes. seven cues of music.
Oh, okay.
Because the story beats for this. Spoilers now. Can't talk about what it was. This is it's very much a sweeping tale, let's say, and very much about kind of continuing off of where episode 2 leaves off in the relationship between Vinar and Bastila, and also so much action, so much work that Brian put into this. Like we've said about the sound design and everything, and holy buckets. And so this is going to be a lot more action packed than episode 2. But basically, the conversations that you and I had were about where does the music start, where does it stop, and then figuring out specifically, like, in the moments, in the bigger, longer sequences of, like, where because there is a version of this where I just sit down and just score through the whole dang thing, but that makes Brian's job much harder in terms of putting the music in. So figuring out where, like, this bit of music ends, where this next one begins, and also, like, finding the big part about spotting sessions is finding the moments of, for instance, if we go back to episode 2, like the when Marcus, when Rook says, "But you have proven yourself defiant." Like, okay, I got to put a pin on that one. I got to do, figure out Vinar's theme. Okay, Trask comes in here, and the more collaborative that the conversation is between me and Cassia, the composer and the director, the more leeway I have to just hit it out of the park for what you guys want, with the exception of my Coruscant moment, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I realized I was like, oh, let's talk about it, but I can't talk about a lot of the specifics because the episode ain't out yet.
Yeah. When we get closer to it in the future, I think we'll do another behind the scenes of, like, the music of Bastila Trust. So it'll be fun.
Yeah.
So
Twill.
Yeah. So we have some fun questions. Putting you in the hot seat, I guess.
Hot seat, but I'm standing up.
It's a pun.
Hot shoes.
Or it's
hot
a
shoes.
metaphor. Whatever. It's a thing.
I think it's both.
Yeah. So
I'll take some questions.
okay.
Be happy to.
So, Marcus was asking, like,
Here he comes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think he had some questions about pineapple and pizza, and I'm not asking that. So, so Marcus asks, like, what instrument do you think Darth Malik or Darth Bandon would play?
Ooh, I have thought about this, and for Malik, I think you'll hear it in the episode 3 of Trust. Is I'm when I auditioned for Unreal Cinema's KOTOR project. My audition for that was actually scoring the Malik short that he made. So I had to come up with a Malik theme for that because, of course, and that's how I do it. So you better believe we're porting that baby over. So it's I think for Malik, so much of it, it's kind of that Darth Vader thing of like more machine than man. So Malik, I think, instrument and color wise inhabits this sort of muted brass, which is like a trombone or a trumpet that you stick something in the bell and it changes the sound, makes it smaller but also buzzier. This sort of distorted thing. I think so. Yeah, muted brass, and then this really creepy sound that I found of like a choir of people inhaling, like just that sound, but like with a bunch of people, and it's just the worst thing, but it's so effective. So to me, that's kind of Malik's sound, and then for Bandon, he's so the way that I came to know him was as Malik's attack dog, his sort of pit bull. So in the same way that Bastila had those sort of female choir whispery chanty bits, I think Bandon is a lot more similar to that primal side of things, but much more shouts. Male or a bass voice shout, syllabic kind of, that kind of thing. I just blew up my speakers. But that sort of motif and so not really instrument. Oh no, we did get some instruments with Malik, but I hope that answers your question, Marcus.
Mm. The obvious answer was a harmonica for Malik, because
that's what I was thinking too.
because his jaw is basically the wraparound harmonica holder. So if he was performing live, he'd be able to do multiple instruments. But
he'd be great at piano, man.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, let me harmonicize my feelings right now. Maybe if he did that, he wouldn't be so on the dark side, So.
That's for KOTOR abridged. I just feel so sad about my situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the kind of genius that, you can expect in the Bastila Audio Drama.
That's really just why Cassie and I are definitely not in charge of doing the music.
Yeah, it would just be like a music video, if that. And then Marcus had one more question, and he's like, "Would you ever compose a Darth Bandon theme for funsies?"
For funsies, no, because it would just make me sad.
Okay.
If I'm being really honest.
Yeah.
It would make me sad to do so, but it would be fun. It would have been cool. All of the hopes, all of the things with the good old Unreal Cinema project. But I will say this. For episode 3 of this, for Trust, this is, I think, going to be the first time I've ever written music to something that I've been in as a voice actor. And it's going to be all kinds of disorienting to have to hear my own voice a bunch of times as I am writing music under it.
Well, you sound great, so...
well, thank you.
Yeah. We're like, we could add like a Darth Maliki or Darth Vader-y effect to your voice, but I was like, oh, it just sounds so good on its own. Like, it's kind of like you brought the harmonica jaw into it, you know? So we didn't have to do any sound effects or sound design or anything. So
and I'm just looking this up right now, because we like to do our research here at the Old Republic podcast. So if you're not willing to do a Darth Bandon theme, totally understandable. But since the game came out in 2003, and this sounds like Darth Bandon to me, "Bring Me to Life" was the number 10 song on the Billboard charts by Evanescence. I think that is the Darth Bandon theme.
I think that's a Bastila thing, personally.
I don't know.
We can fight on it. So.
Yeah, the Darth Bandon playlist is like, I think it's all baby metal and like Evanescence, all of the emo stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess. Did you have any questions before we close, Brian?
No, I think we kind of ran through all of the kind of the musical bits here for part 2. So I guess just kind of one closing question. We kind of opened the episode asking you about kind of your music, background. But just in general, Cassia comes to you and says, "Hey, what do you want to score? Parts 2 and 3 of the Bastila Audio Drama," and you say, "Okay." And I'm assuming then that she sent you over like the script, and you start looking at that. Where do you kind of start just at the beginning, or do you read the whole thing and you're like, "Oh, this would sound good here," and then kind of build off of that, or kind of bookend it and fill in the middle, or what does that process look like?
Well, I will say this was a bit of an unusual circumstance in that I saw the script as a voice actor before I saw them as a composer.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So I had an idea of the story, but for me it's hard, and this is also just, I think, I don't read books and hear music. For me, the music always starts with listening or watching to kind of that, not final, because there's no music in it, but that sort of picture-locked, sound effect up version of it. Because part of my job as a person who writes music is also finding the music in this is going to get nice and spiritual and esoteric, but it's finding the music in the cut, in what the editor, what you, Brian, have already put together, and then hearing that on top of that, rather than sort of reading it as a script. Because, as you guys, I'm sure also know, there's a huge difference between the lines that you write for dialogue in a script and then hearing an actor or a performer do it. You're like, oh wow, there's so much more there, and maybe some stuff that I hadn't considered before. So for me, it starts with that cut version, that first cut of it, and then the rest of it is always always has to be in collaboration with the director. Because we're working together on something. It's a very different process, and actually a lot harder of a process for me to be like, I'm gonna go write music now. That's so much worse.
Yeah.
Than to be like, hey, let's do this thing together. And yeah. So for me, yeah, it's the cut, and it's always the conversation. That spotting session, as we call it.
Yeah, and it's been a great experience, and I can tell how much you know music, how much you know Star Wars music, and it's been great to have you as a voice actor. It's been great to have you as a composer, and
thank you.
Where can our listeners find and support what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I am on Twitter. Twitter is I'm calling it Twitter. I'm not calling it the other thing. But that is usually where I do most of the voice acting-y things. But you can find me there at Joseph D. Spence VA. On the musical side of things, I have some stuff on the SoundClouds, both film score and film score-y stuff, and also some of the what we call the concert works, the music that I've written that actual musicians have played. All of that is, well, a lot of that is on SoundCloud as well. Just type my name up, Joseph David Spence. You should find a little picture of a turtle riding a piece of toast. That's me.
Nice.
Shout out to Abigail Carey for making that art. It slaps. Where else? And yeah, in the near future, there may or may not be a way to listen to the music of this particular project separately. Teaser, teaser. So that's something we're talking about. No definite details on that yet, but yeah, I think I'm really proud of the music that I've done for this project, and would love to get it out there to the world at large in a later time after the next episode's done.
Awesome. So thank you so much for your time, and I guess we can close the episode by saying, may the John Williams music be with you always.
And also with you.
The Old Republic podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, as well as everywhere else that Anchor podcasts are distributed. Subscriptions, reviews, and shares help us out.
And if you want to connect with the podcast on Twitter, we can be found at Old Republic Pod. And if you want to connect with me, I can be found on Instagram at astro_droid_.
You can find us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Old Republic Podcast. Our intro and outro themes were composed by Dennis S. Mowers at DennisSMowersMusic.com.
This episode of the Old Republic Podcast has been brought to you by Nicky Dog from Patreon. May the Force be with you. We will be back soon. Bye for now.